My name is Steve Ruckhouse, and I'll be your host today. We're thrilled to have you join us, whether you're dialing in from the US, Europe, or anywhere else. Today's audience includes professionals from across retail and CPG, category and sales leaders, e-commerce specialists, and analytics experts, all united by a common goal: staying ahead in the rapidly evolving grocery landscape to deliver more of what shoppers want. Over the next several minutes, we'll be diving deep into SymphonyAI's annual grocery e-commerce study, the largest of its kind to date, with insights from over 68 million households and 1.3 billion transactions. We'll explore the vital role of omni-channel shoppers, their behavior, and its impact on the bottom line. You'll hear from Laetitia Berthier, Head of EMEA Customer and Category Solutions Consulting, and Josh McCann, Head of HQ Client Delivery and Analytics in the US, who will share findings and actionable strategies to help you win in a market shaped by shifting consumer behaviors, AI-powered insights, and an increasingly competitive digital ecosystem. Throughout the session, I encourage you to engage via the Q&A button at the top of your screen for live questions. I'll be posing key questions to our experts to spark discussion around trends, challenges, and opportunities. We're going to do a hard stop at 45 minutes, but we'll follow up individually with any questions we can't get to in the session. Additionally, everyone who registered for this briefing will receive access to the recording, as well as a copy of the full report with analysis from our experts. With that, let's get started. Laetitia, Josh, I hand it over to you.
All righty. Well, yeah, so Steve said, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thanks everybody for coming. So this is our fourth annual e-commerce study. So we're excited to be back in front of you for another chance to chat and dive into some hopefully we'll find as some pretty impactful findings. So as Steve mentioned, we've got a pretty big, robust data asset that we're using here: 68 million households, 1.3 billion transactions. So quite a bit of information for us to utilize to identify these trends, these insights, and then ultimately some recommendations. So we're going to focus our time around the first half of 2025. We'll also be looking back over time and providing some trends to give a baseline of activity. And we're focused around traditional grocery retailers in both the US and in Europe. So with that as the backdrop, let's get into a little bit of trend and baseline understanding so that we can then focus ourselves upon what we're seeing now. So we're looking here a longitudinal view over time of the penetration, customer penetration for the channel, starting with the pre-COVID time period kind of as our baseline, and then indexing that penetration. Obviously, during the pandemic and during COVID, we saw a massive spike. And over the next couple of years, about 3 years, we saw a bit of a decline. But the good news is, starting in the middle of 2023, we've started to see a rebound, and the channel is once again growing. We're seeing more and more customers entering the e-commerce channel. So kind of validation of both the importance to the customer, but also the importance to the retail and CPG community for how e-commerce is an important growth driver for each of them. So as we move forward, let's start to now talk a bit about the omni-channel customer. And that shopper is extremely important to the e-commerce channel. When you look over the last couple of years, we've seen almost 8 in 10 shoppers in the e-commerce channel are omni-channel, right? Meaning they're shopping both online and in the store. And they're contributing about that same proportion of sales. So the lion's share of sales, the lion's share of customers in the channel are shopping both channels, right? In store and online. And maybe more importantly, what we find of those shoppers when you compare them to in-store only shoppers is they're significantly more loyal. They're about 3 times more loyal than just in-store only customers, and they shop a lot more frequently, about 3 times more frequently. So again, another understanding as to why the e-commerce channel is becoming so important, or continuing to be important, and driving growth for the retail and the CPG communities. So let's again click forward and now understand a bit about the omni-channel shopper and how they deliver growth. So each year, if you were to go back over the last 4 years, we've looked at the incremental spend that this customer delivers when they move from being a single channel or in-store only into an omni-channel behavior. And that's this year is at a 16% increase. And that's been quite consistent over the years, ranging between like 15 and 18%, but still a significant increase. As you would expect, there's a bit of cannibalization when customers move to omni-channel behavior in their existing channel, but that's more than made up for with what they spend incrementally in the online channel. And then the good news is that growth comes from a couple of places. You would probably expect basket size, larger baskets, to drive some of that increase, right? And what we're seeing is that half of that 16% increase is coming from a growth in basket size. E-commerce transactions tend to be larger than in-store. But customers are not just swapping an in-store transaction for an e-commerce one. They're actually shopping more frequently. So half of that 16% is also coming from a net increase in frequency. So great news, right? That's exactly what you want as a retailer. That's what you want as a CPG, to have more bigger baskets. You know, the best news you can have in the retail industry. So now let's talk about loyalty. I mentioned a bit before that omni-channel shoppers tend to be more loyal, but let's dive into that a bit more detail. First, let's talk about what it means to be a loyal customer for the retailer. That means that they are on the top echelon of having their needs met from that retailer, both through in-store and online transactions. And what we find, because we track the rate of retention and keeping your loyal customers loyal, and omni-channel shoppers tend to be retained at a 4 percentage point higher rate than in-store only. And that's important because as customers downgrade, when you move from being a loyal shopper to what we'll call secondary, their spend declines by 42%. That's a huge decrease. So retailers and CPGs alike want to do everything they can to keep their loyal shoppers loyal. We see a similar effect for customers as they upgrade. Omni-channel customers tend to upgrade faster. They tend to upgrade more. From secondary, you see a 7 percentage point improvement in the ability to upgrade customers when they become omni-channel. And tertiary, or the least loyal customer base, up 17%. And again, why is that important? Well, when a customer moves from secondary to loyal, they spend 52% more, over a 50% increase. So again, there's a huge value in getting customers to continue to move up that loyalty ladder, and omni-channel shopping behavior is a really important lever, a really impactful and effective lever that retailers can use to drive loyalty through their broader chain. So next, let's, I think, focus upon the retention in the channel. So we talked about retaining customers as a loyal customer. Well, to do that and to continue to take that behavior to the bank, you have to retain them in the channel. And while we've seen a nice trend of increase in the second half of 2023, we saw 48% of e-commerce customers continue to shop in the channel, moving up to 55% in the most recent quarter. But that still means that 50% of shoppers are not continuing to be e-commerce shoppers, right? They're not continuing in the channel, which represents a huge opportunity for retailers and CPGs in order to maintain those benefits that we just talked about. So you should employ and identify, and we'll talk about some tactics in which to do that here shortly, but there's a lot of headroom, right? You want to continue to have those customers that you gain into the e-commerce channel to become omni-channel shoppers, to retain them, to keep them in that, so that you can maintain their loyalty and that increase in spend. So opportunity abounds here. Let's shift gears a little bit now and focus in on just that first half of 2025. And I get a bit of a baseline setting to understand what we're seeing from the channel itself. So when we look at e-commerce in the first half, we saw sales increase by about 11%, double-digit increases. That's pretty solid and hefty increase. So a nice result to have. But what we're seeing is there's a bit of changing behavior in how that growth is being achieved. When you look at the lion's share, well, actually all of that growth is coming through new customers. 12% increase in new customers in the channel. And if you remember back to the first slide we showed on that increased penetration, this is that coming to life. But on the other side of that coin, we see both basket size and frequency actually declining. Basket sizes are down 2.5% with all of those new customers, and frequency is also declining. But we think each of those, both the new customers, basket size, and frequency, all represent an opportunity to drive incremental growth. And that's what we're going to focus on in the back half or the back part of our presentation here. We're going to talk about how you can accelerate the reach of those new customers, how you can dive into basket size and understand how small baskets are influencing that result, and how that might actually represent an opportunity for growth. And then we'll talk about how to improve frequency through the use of subscription opportunities. So we got a lot to get to still, not a lot of time to get there. So I'm going to go ahead and hand over to Letitia, and she's going to start and talk about the rise of that omnichannel shopper. Letitia?
Thank you, Josh, and hi, everyone. So now let's take a closer look at this growth in omnichannel shoppers and how you can really take advantage of it. When you look at how the e-commerce customer base has evolved in the last few years, after 2 years of strong post-pandemic growth, like Josh mentioned, we have seen in 2023 a clear decline in the number of customers shopping online. Shoppers returned to physical stores. But over the last 2 years, we've seen a solid rebound with 7.3% growth in 2024, and that momentum has only accelerated. In Q2 2025, the number of e-commerce customers grew by 12.4% compared to last year, because retailers improved the online experience, delivery became faster, more reliable, and also new trends like social commerce and better personalization really encouraged this digital shopping adoption. So now, looking at where new e-commerce customers are coming from, we see an interesting pattern. When we split this 12% increase in e-commerce shoppers, 1/3 or 4.2% of growth comes from existing in-store customers who started shopping both online and in-store, what we call our omnichannel shoppers. Another third, or 3.9%, comes from entirely new customers who also adopt an omnichannel approach right away. And 4% of new customers shop exclusively online. So in total, roughly 2/3 of new e-commerce customers are actually omnichannel shoppers. So this is showing how important it is for retailers to connect the online and the offline experience. And that's great to have a lot of new shoppers, but there's also a real opportunity here. New customers visit 58% less often and spend 13% less per basket than retained customers. That means if we engage them better, the upside for growth is significant. And when we look at regional differences, because the picture is quite different when we compare the US and Europe, we see that in the US, growth is driven by new customer acquisition. You can see it in green here. Retailers are doing a great job attracting new shoppers online, and that's fueling total sales up 12%, which is actually much faster than what we see in Europe. Now, retention and spending growth are a bit lower in the US at the moment, but that's normal for a market that's still expanding. And in Europe, it's a different story. Online penetration is already higher at 5.3% compared to 4% in the US. So the big opportunity isn't just to attract new shoppers, but to deepen the relationship with the ones who are already there. And that strategy is paying off. Retention is stronger, 65% versus 54% in the US, and spending from loyal customers is growing more than 3 times faster. So the contrast is clear. The US is more in acceleration mode, pulling in new customers at scale, while Europe is more in a mature phase, where loyalty, customer value are driving the next wave of growth. And in both cases, there's a common challenge for retailers. How do you turn one-time shoppers or in-store customers into loyal repeat buyers across channels? That's where AI can play a key role. By analyzing the behavior of existing omnichannel shoppers, our predictive AI model can identify which in-store customers are most likely to start shopping both online and in-store. It's a small number, just 6%, but it's big value. 6% of in-store customers are predicted to become omnichannel shoppers. And if you target these customers effectively, this can allow you to use your acquisition budget more effectively, first of all, but also to build loyalty and to maximize lifetime value. Once you have identified which in-store customers are likely to become omnichannel shoppers, the next question is, how do you attract them online? What catches their attention? Looking at their in-store shopping habits, we see some clear patterns. These shoppers have a much higher propensity to buy organic products, to respond to promotions, and choose larger pack sizes. So by sending personalized offers and highlighting these preferences online, retailers can really make the transition to e-commerce more appealing and increase the likelihood that these customers become loyal omnichannel shoppers. When we look at categories this time, through the lens of customers with high omnichannel propensity, three clear themes emerge. First, frozen and convenient foods, things like frozen fruits, vegetables, frozen meats. Then health and specialty products, for example, baby formula, healthy food, or plant-based products. And third, household essentials, from detergents and cleaners to stable ingredients like rice and pasta. So these are the categories that are most likely to draw customers into an omnichannel experience. Now, let's see, how do you turn these insights into action, and what the opportunity looks like in terms of growth? And the opportunity is huge. 5.4% incremental sales in e-commerce. If you do what? First, if you leverage AI to identify and target the in-store shoppers with high propensity, high omnichannel propensity, those that are most likely to start shopping both online and in-store. Second, attract them online by highlighting high potential categories like frozen and convenient foods with targeted promotions, bundles, using AI-driven personalization to recommend the right products, but also increase the visibility of health and specialty products online to attract your more health-conscious shoppers and make the experience seamless with options like click and collect or bulk pack. And third, the value that it generates, as I said, it's plus 5.4% incremental sales. If you just encourage one additional online purchase among these shoppers. So that's a big opportunity to capture incremental sales, but also to strengthen long-term loyalty and to help offset potential declines from customers downgrading. Now I will hand over back to Josh, who will talk about the small basket trend.
All right, thanks, Letitia. Yeah, so let's again kind of ladder ourselves back to what was the opportunity. So when we looked at that growth number that was coming in the channel right up 11%, we saw about 2.5% decrease in basket size. So what does that mean? Let's see if we're concerned or how we can go ahead and track against that. So like I mentioned, we've been doing this study for a while, but what we started to find, actually last year was our first time looking into this, we started to track the size of baskets and how that was having a material change. So if you look all the way back to 2021, you can see a pretty clear trend where large size baskets, right, 50 items or more, were consistently declining over time. Small baskets, we're saying 20 or less, are consistently increasing, and medium size, 20 to 50, slight declines, but we're much more stable. And then most recently, we've seen that these proportions, right? This is a distribution of the basket sizes, have now kind of leveled off. So that trend is now stabilized. But what does that mean from a growth standpoint? So obviously, small baskets are becoming much higher proportion. So it would make sense that overall basket sizes would look to decline. But when you look at the delivery of growth from each of these basket sizes, you actually see that small basket increases are delivering some pretty impressive increases, right? 17% increase in sales from small baskets. Medium still growing nicely, and then large, roughly kind of flat to slightly up. So with that as the backdrop, the question was, how does that differ, or is that the same between Europe and the U.S. again? Letitia talked a little bit about some things here, and let's revisit a few of those things. So we talked about that e-commerce customer penetration was already more mature in Europe, right up 5%, in the U.S. at 4%. Yet sales increases for the channel were higher in the U.S. versus Europe, smaller base, so growing. But again, 12 and 9%, neither of those things are poor results. And where that's coming from was a bit different, right? The US, we're seeing an increase in penetration of the channel with those existing customers, where in Europe, we saw an increase in overall customers in the channel, and then they were converting a consistent group of those things. But where this started to become more interesting through the lens of the basket size was the units per trip, right? The basket size on average in the two regions was quite different. Europe's basket size is 2x that of what we see in the US. So that begged the question, are the trends that we see for small baskets the same, or are they very, very different in these two regions? Well, before we got to that, we want to understand maybe what were the drivers of that difference. So we did a bit of a view or a review of just some practices in these regions across some of the largest retailers. So we looked at in the US and took a peek at what are some of the things that could drive such a different result from basket size, and things like minimum thresholds. So what is the minimum threshold that we find generally in these regions? And they are different. So, I mean, looking at retailers like Kroger and Albertsons and Walmart and Instacart, compared to that in Europe of Rewe, Carrefour, Tesco. And what we found is a pretty distinct difference, that the European region has traditionally and typically a higher threshold, right? 50 euros or more, where the US has much lower, 35. And that's not, blanket across the board, but the point being, these regions are acting differently, and that is impacting the average size of the basket and customers' ability to get those baskets differently. So then that begged the question that I kind of teed up before of, well, what happens from a small basket standpoint? And we definitely see some quite different results across these regions, where in the US, the small basket, right, 20 items or less, was approaching 50% of all of the e-commerce transactions, where in Europe, while growing, it still only made it to about 5 or 6%. So an obvious impact of those minimum threshold requirements and how that is impacting the customer's use or ability to get to small baskets. Now, when we again track back to what we showed before, what is the growth pattern for small baskets and the other sizes? Well, in both regions, we're seeing great increases, right? Double-digit increases for the US, double-digit increases for Europe, different base, size of the prize from those things, but both are seeing nice increases. So I think customers are definitely voting that they want, and they are taking advantage of the ability to have smaller baskets, and as a way to really focus on the convenience that the e-commerce channel can bring to the customer. And then again, they're voting with their dollars. Both, you'll see medium baskets are up as well, but again, the largest growth coming from those small baskets. So we next wanted to look at what categories were contributing to that small basket growth. And we're going to come back to a global view here, because we didn't really see differentiation between the categories that we see contributing to the growth in the US versus Europe. Those were consistent. And we see a couple of really clear themes here. First is alcohol, right? Spirits, wine, beer. These are the categories that we find most frequently in small baskets, which makes sense. There could be a reason why you need to have those things delivered to you, as opposed to running and picking them up yourself. Then another trend you see, maybe baby diapers and laundry detergent. So you've got mothers and fathers that have an urgent need for some diapers or cleaning material, and who knows, maybe you put some wine in or beer in those baskets as well for mom and dad. And then you have some kind of just traditional high penetration beverage categories: coffee, carbonated drinks. Those have always been high penetration things in the e-commerce channel. But we also wanted to look at some emerging categories. What are things that aren't on the top of the list yet, but they're making their way up? And we found 5 categories that differentiated themselves a bit based on that growth. And one theme is they do tend to be fresh, right? You've got red meat, pastries, dairy products. Some of those more fresh categories are starting to make their way up the food chain, if you will, on things that small baskets are really helping to deliver. So next we thought, what about the customer? Again, let's put the lens of the customer hat on here. So we segmented customers based on those that tend to be very small basket focused, right? That was the predominant type of e-commerce transaction they had and compared their business and their behavior against all other e-commerce customers. And what we found is these small basket customers, again, are the key drivers of growth. 24% increase in sales from small basket customers year on year. And that's driven almost completely by an increase in customers. So here's where we're seeing acquisition, right? The increase in customers that we've seen in previous slides and part of our earlier discussion is really being driven by this trend of customers willing and wanting smaller baskets. Letitia hinted at the idea, though, that these people, as they come into the these customers, they come into the retail atmosphere, they're not as loyal, right? We look at on the left-hand side, we see the index of loyal customers versus total. They're not as loyal. So you have an opportunity to treat these small basket customers as an acquisition strategy and then move them up the loyalty ladder, right? Move them from tertiary to secondary to loyal and generate all of the benefits that we've talked about before, right? Making sure that they're not just maybe e-commerce only, that they're omni-channel, that they're moving up that loyalty. There's all the benefits that come along with that. So you have a nice runway of growth, both from an acquisition into an ongoing improvement in their business. But how do you do that? Like, how do you take these customers and move them immediately into a more valuable customer? And we think the first and probably the best place to start is just one more item in their basket, right? If they're already targeting small baskets, they have a lot of other needs that can be met. And the way that we've done that and seen done successful in many cases is through the idea of basket affinity. So what categories tend to be in the baskets together so that we can help drive things through like product suggestions, cross-bundle promotions, even retail media is an idea of finding customers that are putting things like spirits and liquor in their baskets and providing them with advertisements for mixers, juices, and carbonated drinks. Some of these are somewhat intuitive, but the fact that we've confirmed those intuitions through analysis on just the small baskets should give you high confidence to be able to invest in these kind of activities. So like I said, you see spirits and liquor, you've got your baby diapers there that you can expand from laundry detergent and also look at cleaning supplies and dish detergent, right? Red meat, that was one of the emerging categories. Here, you could probably build a recipe. You've got ready to eat items and, frozen vegetables and confectionery or candy, put some bread, milk, and ice cream with those things. So finding one more item in just half of those small baskets could deliver nearly a 1% increase in revenue for the channel. So, a pretty impactful opportunity. So again, to recap here, you've got what felt like an issue with 2.5% decrease in basket size, which actually the good news is represents quite an opportunity and a behavioral shift with the customer as they're building more and more small baskets into their repertoire. So pretty exciting to drive additional understanding and actionable recommendations of how to take advantage of that from an acquisition and then growth standpoint. So I'm going to hand it back to Letitia, and she'll take you through the last set of opportunities around frequency.
All right. So yes, let's talk about this subscription opportunity, really a smart way to tackle the shopping frequency decline. As we mentioned earlier, the small baskets are the new normal. E-commerce attracts new customers, but the real challenge is frequency because it's slipping. And here, subscription models can really help rebuild that rhythm and keep customers actively engaged. First of all, a definition. What do we consider a subscription program? That's clearly this kind of business model where customers pay a recurring fee to receive benefits such as exclusive promotions, automatic replenishment, or free delivery. We've seen many retailers successfully use this model to strengthen loyalty. For example, Walmart or Instacart in the US, Carrefour or Tesco in Europe, or Coles in Australia. These programs keep really shoppers engaged and coming back more often. And to better understand how shoppers behave online, SymphonyAI developed a segmentation model that classifies the e-commerce shoppers based on how consistently they shop. This model looks at two key aspects. First, how steady their spending is over time, and second, how often they come back to buy the same types of products or categories. And from this analysis, we identified 4 distinct segments on the right: the highly consistent shoppers, moderately low consistent shoppers, and the inconsistent shoppers. And this segmentation gives us a better view of the biggest opportunity for loyalty and for growth. When we look at each of these segments, the highly consistent shoppers represent only 7% of the e-commerce customer base, but they punch way above their weight, accounting for 25% of total online sales. They shop regularly, almost every month, and they show very steady purchasing patterns. The moderately consistent shoppers are a slightly larger group, about 10% of customers, and they drive the biggest share of sales, 32%. They also buy frequently, though with a bit more variability from one period to the next. And the low consistent and inconsistent shoppers show a very different pattern. They buy less often, they are less predictable, and typically with smaller baskets. And what's really striking is the difference in value. The top 2 segments, the highly and moderately consistent shoppers, make up just 17% of customers, but they generate more than half of all e-commerce sales. On average, they spend 10 times more than the least consistent shoppers, and they are active almost 10 months a year. That tells us that one thing very clearly: consistency is loyalty, and loyalty drives value. And to confirm that point, we've looked at loyalty levels, and highly and moderately consistent shoppers have a much larger share of loyal customers, and they also have a stronger retention of these loyal customers than the low consistent shoppers. But there's a challenge. Our consistent shoppers are spending less than they did last year, and this is leading to a decline in sales from the retained e-commerce shopper group. And this raises important questions about how we maintain growth and how we keep customers engaged over time. Because when we dig deeper, we see that the decline in spending among the consistent shoppers is largely driven by the lower purchase frequency. That's what you see in blue here. It's about 60% to 80% of a drop that comes from a decline in frequency. And interestingly, on the right, you will see the inconsistent shoppers that are actually increasing their shopping frequency. And that's showing a very different pattern, but that's not enough to grow your sales. So what do? You identify, first of all, to reverse the trend, the key categories to drive frequent purchases, the items that customers buy again and again, and especially online. These include staple and daily essentials like paper goods, eggs, milk, yogurt, or cereal, but also convenient foods such as frozen and ready-to-eat products. So promoting subscriptions in these high-frequency categories, you can really encourage more regular engagement and stabilize the order patterns. But do you know how much gain you can expect from this kind of subscription program? We measured it. Our analysis shows that introducing a subscription program could generate up to 1.3% incremental sales for the e-commerce channel. The principle is quite simple. Focusing on your most consistent online shoppers, those who already buy regularly, and make it even easier for them to stay engaged by offering convenient monthly deliveries, exclusive discounts, centering the program around staple categories. You help customers simplify their routine and reduce the chance of drop-off. The objective is to enroll at least half of your highly consistent shoppers and encourage them to make at least one purchase every month. That alone can help close the frequency gap we've seen and sustain a more steady rhythm of engagement over time. So in short, a well-designed subscription program helps you maintain spending among your most valuable shoppers, protect against declining frequency, and could deliver 1.3% incremental sales growth for the e-commerce channel. So the opportunity here again is clear, but if you want to capture it, it requires more than just a good strategy. And retailers really need the tools to move fast, to spot these demand shifts, and to act before customers drift away. That's exactly where AI and where customer-centric data makes the difference. We can transform insights into action and action into growth much faster. For instance, AI can recommend personalized product bundles or cross-sell opportunities to turn the small baskets into bigger ones. AI can identify high propensity omnichannel shoppers and target them with the right offers to encourage online engagement. AI can also help enroll shoppers into subscription programs by detecting those who regularly buy staples and nudging them with relevant offers. But also AI can flag early signals of churn, so to give retailers but also CPGs the chance to re-engage customers before they slip away. So in short, AI, it's not just about revealing opportunities, it's about acting on them faster and smarter to drive faster growth. So to summarize, what we've seen today is that there is a 7.6% growth opportunity in e-commerce just waiting to be unlocked, let's say, and it comes down to using AI-powered customer-centric insights to drive faster decisions that deliver growth. First, by expanding the customer reach and accelerating the rise of omnichannel shoppers, you can drive up to 5.4% growth by targeting the right in-store customers and encouraging them to shop across channel. Second, by recognizing that small baskets are the new normal and leveraging AI to grow their value and smart cross-sale and personalization, you can unlock another 0.9% in e-commerce sales. And third, addressing the decline in purchase frequency with well-designed subscription program, you can maintain engagement, build loyalty, and generate an additional 1.3% growth. So together, these three opportunities really show how AI and data can drive measurable impact. So the message is clear: put your customer data to work, let AI guide the next move, and turn every insight into action to grow loyalty and to grow sales. Thank you. That's it for the insights and for the recommendations. Maybe there are some questions now.
Yeah, thank you, Letitia. Thanks, Josh. That was quite a deep dive into the information here, and we did have some questions that came in, but I also want to remind everybody that you are going to see the full report here, and we will be distributing it in ebook form after the presentation. On the subject of subscriptions, Letitia, what are the key elements of a successful grocery subscription program, and can it be used to convert the less frequent shoppers?
Yes, sure. The key elements, and not only for the less frequent shoppers, but also for those that you want to continue and engage even better, I would say flexible delivery options, so customers have a choice, but also free delivery service or discounted delivery service. We've seen that in the US, we have much lower thresholds, around $35. But in Europe, thresholds are much higher. You need to buy minimum 50 euros or 70 euros. That's typical for home delivery. But that's clearly a service. This free delivery service is really super appreciated by customers. But it also takes exclusive deals, exclusive discounts. In Europe, Albert Heijn is, for instance, offering 10% on all organic products. So this kind of things make subscriptions really, really attractive.
Okay, thank you. All right, going back to the regional differences, looks like the US is still in kind of in the mode of acquiring new e-commerce shoppers, while Europe is more focused on retention and spend growth. How should e-commerce strategies differ by market maturity, and what lessons can US retailers and CPGs take from the more mature markets like Europe?
Yeah, I'll take a stab.
All right.
I'd almost boil it down to more kind of retailer by retailer, because you're going to have examples of very mature retailers like Walmart and Target in the US that are probably going to have to act and look to grow more like some of those European retailers. And I'm sure that there's retailers in Europe still that have an opportunity to drive that increased penetration. So I think it needs to be a bit more micro from there, and then take into account the marketplace dynamics, like the typical minimums, as you think about what are the right tactics to undertake there. So I guess to specific example, and to build on what Letitia was talking about, a subscription service that offers free delivery can be a great way actually to enable small baskets. If you no longer have a minimum threshold, then you can take advantage of small baskets and the convenience that they represent. And if that's a customer expectation in the US at a different level maybe than it is in Europe, then maybe that's a higher priority program at a US retailer that's looking to drive their business forward. So, you can also take, I think, a European retailer that sees the growth of small baskets in the US and want to take advantage of that. Well, something that I didn't mention, I think is important to look at, is those key categories that tend to be found in small baskets. If you look at them, they're kind of higher dollar ring, right? A bottle of wine or spirits, beer, diapers, those things, it's very easy to get to a threshold of $35 or 50 euros with a couple of those items. So understanding that and having those be the tactical ways that you look to attract people to small baskets can be an important growth for either. So definitely opportunities to learn, but I don't think you always have to look across across the pond at the others. You could just look across the state or across the landscape that you're operating in.
Right. Thanks, Josh. We are at time as promised here. We do have some other questions that did come in, but we can get those responses to everybody individually after the presentation. And as I mentioned earlier, everyone who joined us will receive access to the recording and our annual omni-channel report. So with that, I want to thank Josh and Letitia for this, and also this incredible audience for taking time with us today. Happy retailing. We'll see you next month when we release our quarterly grocery sentiment index report. See you soon.